What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Living Electric. We're going to start off with our still unnamed segment about how we're living the electric life. This is the segment where we talk about either something that's happened to us recently driving an EV or something we're doing to try to be more green or that kind of fun stuff. Do you mind if I go first? Mine's relatively simple.
Yeah. Mine's
Okay.
pretty simple too.
Yeah.
And then I have a funny educational story after that.
Right. So, our house, as I may have talked about in the electrical upgrade podcast, is close to 120 years old. So, we have the original windows still, and those are not very well insulated. And I think we talked about this off podcasts, but you suggested and some others suggested that you can actually get essentially shrink wrap for your windows, which I didn't realize. This is a great discovery. But essentially, it doesn't look great. It looks kind of janky, but you can essentially put plastic sheets over your windows and then shrink wrap them, and it insulates your windows a lot better so air doesn't flow in. Your house isn't as drafty. So I just started doing that on most of the house now. I actually ran out of that plastic film stuff to put it on there.
You do have a lot of windows.
Yeah, we went through a ton of it already. So, and it was a learning process too because I've never done this before. But the already I'm noticing a difference. Our house is not as drafty. I'm hoping this is going to just help save on efficiency of our home in general over the winter because we just got killed on not only our electric bill but just our gas bill. Just everything in the winter is just way more expensive because you're losing so much heat to just the draftiness of the home. So
Yeah.
we're hoping this is going to kind of help us be a little bit more green, not use as much energy this winter, even if it does get super cold, just that our house is a little bit more insulated. So we're doing that, and then I'm also going to start just looking all over the house to see where can we just insulate our house better for the winter, because we didn't do any of this last year and it was a bad time. So
I know in our new house, Tyler and I actually talked about doing that today.
Yeah.
Getting that plastic wrap because it is freezing in our house.
Really, and you have mostly new windows, right?
Can you hear that?
It was very slight. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, we'll just leave it in.
Okay.
Helicopter, plane, or something flew over. We have newer windows, but it's freezing. But the reason I think it's so cold is we have one vent for one massive area. And then in my office, it's warmer, but upstairs, it is so cold. So we'll probably end up doing that shrink wrap too. It was so good for us in Cleveland. It really helped us with our energy bills.
Right. Do you use a lot of space heaters and stuff in the winter? Or
I'm terrified of house fires, so.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, we found recently, we got one last year actually for our living room because it's an extension off the rest of the house, and it's not it's again similar kind of thing where there's not many vents in there to actually heat that space, and you've got three exterior walls. So I didn't realize there are oil-filled electric heaters. I don't know if you've seen those before.
No.
Which are,
Never.
as I found out, way safer, way quieter, just overall a better space heater. They're a lot more expensive than just the cheap $20 heaters, but maybe something to look into if you're interested in having a safer heater and actually having a space heater just to drop in your room or whatever. So
yeah, I'll have to check them out. I was doing some research on smart space heaters, and I found one that was $90, and you can control it with your phone and monitor the energy usage. So I might look at that one. But yeah, if you could send me some links, that would be cool.
For sure.
I never even knew that was a thing.
Yeah, you probably haven't been over to our house because you just moved to Columbus, but. In the winter, we have that we have it running all the time in our living room. So
I've been to your house in the winter.
Really? Did you come last winter at all?
Yeah, we went house shopping in the spring.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we have
Come
that
on,
running
Alex.
basically. We have that running basically all winter. So you may have seen it already.
Yeah, it was 3 years of friendship wasted. No, I'm just kidding. No, that room does get pretty cold in the winter. So yeah. Do you guys even have vents in that room?
We have two. Yeah,
okay.
just two along the wall, but that's it. So
got it. Yeah. Well, next time I'll pay more attention to the space heater. That will actually be the very first thing I go to when I walk in
I
the
hope
house
so.
next time.
It's toasty.
Yeah.
The
I'm
bad
gonna
part
make it
is
happen.
our cat, like, I'm afraid he's gonna like toast his brains or something. Like, he literally sits right next to it. Like, he'll put his face up against the space heater, and I'm like, dude, you're gonna like fry your brain doing that. So I just left from downstairs, and he's sitting against it. I'm like, dude.
He turns around, all his whiskers are just gone.
Right, right, yeah.
Oh no.
He's doing his best.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted on how the plastic wrap works for you. I didn't realize that your house was 120 years old, and those were like over 100-year-old windows. Like, I knew that they were original, but I guess I didn't realize how old your house was.
Yeah, it was built in like 1906 maybe. So like we're nearly 120. Like not quite, but close.
It's still 2009 in my brain.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's funny.
But whatever. Your Lady Gaga came out with the Fame Monster.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's just perpetually the year.
Yes.
That's funny.
Well, keep us posted.
We'll do.
Yeah.
So what about you? What's been how have you been living the electric life?
Well, this week not very well. No, I'm just joking. I do have one update. I finally found out our Tesla universal wall connector is on its way, and
nice.
we're going to get it next week, and hopefully get it installed within the next 2 weeks, which
Very
is
cool.
very exciting. So I'm pretty happy with that. I guess the only other thing that like really, since this segment is so broad, we learned something new with EV ownership. Since we just got the Leaf and it has a different charging standard than we've ever used before.
Right.
So for those who aren't familiar, some of the Nissan Leafs, the newer ones, have fast charging ports. Called they're CHAdeMO. If using ChargeWay terms, it's blue, the blue connector type. And this is our first vehicle with the blue CHAdeMO connector type, and
Right.
we don't have a lot of experience with it. And we ended up going up to Cleveland for a Halloween party from Columbus, and we got physically stuck with the connector in the charge port at an EVgo station for 2 hours.
Jeez. Was this on the way back?
No, it
Or the
was
way
on the
up
way
there?
there.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
we were meeting up with friends for lunch, and we're like, we'll just stop off. Like, it was a pretty rough trip getting up there. The Leaf did not do very well with the headwind, and we needed to charge. And do you have any experience with like CHAdeMO connectors?
Very little. I've used them for like with the Tesla adapter. I've used them a little bit, but like even compared to CCS, like it's not a very friendly connector in my opinion. Like it's difficult to
No.
plug in. Like it's just not nice.
No.
So
It really is not. Yeah. And that was the downside with us, is that we had no idea, because we always had experience with green CCS and red Tesla connectors, and we thought that the Leaf had a manual release where genuinely every other vehicle has that.
Yeah.
And it turns out the Leaf doesn't, because the CHAdeMO connector, the way it's designed, doesn't allow that.
Wow.
It's like, so I talked with our friend who works at EVgo, because I called them and I was like, hey, like, I don't know what to do here. We've already called Nissan. They're going to be 4 hours. EVgo says they're going to be 4 hours. And it actually turns out that the connector for CHAdeMO is the exact opposite of CCS. So green CCS actually, there's a pin that attaches to the vehicle, as you know from utilizing it. So when there's a manual release from the car, you can pull that on the vehicle and the pin lifts up for you to pull out the connector. Whereas the CHAdeMO, it's the opposite. The release is actually on the connector. So if it gets stuck, you actually have to take apart the connector and manually release it from inside the connector.
oh my god. So like. I have so many questions. So, first off, before we get to like you getting unstuck, how did you realize that the vehicle was stuck initially? Was this when you were trying to leave, or was this after you plugged in?
It is when we were trying to leave, and I'll just say this, EVgo definitely has reliable chargers, but man, are they expensive. It was like $24 to get like a small amount of energy, and I realized the app didn't have a way for me to cancel the charge, so like the stop
Like
the charge
end the session
in the vehicle.
or anything.
Nope. Yeah, and the vehicle doesn't have that either that I can find. So I tried to actually press in the button on the Blue
Right.
CHAdeMO connector,
Yeah.
and that's when it got stuck. I think there's like some type of like safety mechanism when it's like active, you can't press the button.
Interesting.
And so that's when I realized that we were stuck.
Wow.
Yeah, EVgo, I give them full credit. They tried to like remote start like the charger, nothing was working. They tried to
Yeah.
tell me how to like wiggle it out of there, and yeah, the Nissan dealership had no idea what to do. Like,
Of course
it was
not,
bad.
yeah.
They actually it almost got to the point where they were going to call a tow truck to remove the charge port from our car, brick it, take it to one of the local Nissan dealerships in Cleveland, and replace the charge port.
Wow. Like
And that's
physically
happened-
rip it out of there.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So how we got out of there is after getting so angry and like we were
That had to be
super
so
late to
frustrating.
meeting up with our friends.
Yeah.
Tyler was on Reddit and he just gets out of the car quietly, and I'm on the phone with my mom because I'm like, hey, you guys might need to come pick us up. And I just feel the car, like going up and down. And I look over the hood, and Tyler's like, yanking on it, and then all of a sudden he just pulls it out and he puts the connector back. And it turns out that's what you have to do. If the CHAdeMO connector gets stuck to your charge port, our friend that works at EVgo said you have to rotate it in slow circular motions for like the pin to release, and then you pull it out, or you can go up and down
My
and
gosh.
then pull it out.
Jeez.
So yeah,
I cannot imagine. I'd be so frustrated. Like,
Oh yeah,
especially
Yeah.
like you all have been doing this for how long? Like charging electric vehicles, been doing all this. And that's got to be so frustrating. Like, what you're doing. It's not like you were just a random driver that just bought a Leaf and pulled up and is trying to charge. Like, I cannot imagine. Like, for most people, that would be the nail in the coffin for
Oh, yeah.
like driving another EV. They're like, I'm never
Yep.
going to put up with this again. And
Yeah.
I think that's like generally what I hear from some people is they have one bad experience with an EV and they're like, I'm never doing this again because I
Yep.
don't want to be stuck in the same situation. So,
Yep.
holy cow.
Yep.
That's
Well,
so frustrating.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, you hit it right on the head. Like, I was so frustrated. It's like we're supposed to be knowledgeable. Like we're
Yeah.
supposed to know this stuff. And I mean, I kind of had to give myself like a little bit of a break. Like, this is all new in terms of like this
Yeah.
connector type. I've never
Right.
really used it, so. But it definitely taught me that the Leaf is no longer going to be a long distance vehicle. It's going to stay local, and we will not be taking it up to Cleveland
Jeez.
any longer. Yeah, and
That's frustrating.
It actually, not to sound like too much like a Tesla fanatic, it actually made me realize that I never should have got rid of the Model 3 because
Yeah.
the experience is just by far better. So
Yeah, I made a whole video about like why your first EV should be a Tesla, and I still stand by that. Like, as much as you can critique Tesla for all kinds of different things, they have nailed the driver experience and the charging experience. Like, it is very hard to screw up driving a Tesla,
Yeah.
even long distance. Like, it is hard to run out of charge. Like, it's near impossible. Unless you are trying to like get stuck or run out of battery, like the chances of it happening are very low. So that's super frustrating. So literally you got out by Tyler, it sounds like, fixed the issue. It wasn't anybody else. It was Tyler just
Yeah.
going out there and ripping it out essentially.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, and
And this
I
was how
even
long
tried.
after? And
It
this was
was
how long
2
after?
2 hours. It took about
Oh my
2 hours, and it was
gosh.
going to take 4 hours for a tow truck to get to us.
Wow.
And yeah, if it was anybody else, I would have, like if I wasn't like in the EV industry and like, like passionate about like teaching,
Yeah.
and this was just my vehicle, I would have gotten rid of it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
But you live, you learn, you know what? And
Right.
now I can educate people about that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I made it
So
to
was
lunch.
this-
So,
There you go. So was this, at the end of the day, was this an EVgo plug problem, or was this a Nissan Leaf problem, or was it a combination, or...
I really can't say because like we used other fast chargers on the way home. We used a
Yeah.
non-network ABB fast charger, and then we used
Really?
a ChargePoint fast charger, and we didn't have the issue at all. So, but like
Interesting.
what I noticed is that the CHAdeMO connector at EVgo was slightly different from the other ones in terms of like how you press the trigger to release it.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and from what Tyler has done research, those specific ones at EVgo and Electrify America all have problems with getting
Really?
stuck to cars. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's super frustrating. I know
Yeah.
I've had problems in the past with because I got one of the last chat about adapters that Tesla probably sold just so I could have it. I got one of those, and I have had, not to that severity, but I have had issues when I'm plugging in sometimes where the Chatamo will get stuck in the Tesla adapter. Like, I have to use my full strength to rip it out of the adapter.
Oh, yeah.
So I could definitely see that happening and, like, getting stuck in a car. So that's just super frustrating.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. But, you know, like I said, like, I'm taking it as a learning lesson, and thankfully, you know, we have our friend that works at EVgo, so, you know, they were able to provide some insight on that. So
yeah. Did they comp you a charging session or anything to be like, hey, sorry for the trouble?
I forgot to call back. I was so angry that I'm like,
You're just done with it.
I want lunch. I want to go to the Halloween party, and I want to forget I ever bought this car. So,
jeez, wow.
3 more years, Alex.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Is it too late to cancel Are you still in that waiting period where you can cancel or return it or something?
I might need to look into that. It's been about 2 weeks, so I'm not sure, but
I feel like there is some. You'd have to look at the contract and all that stuff because they could really lock you in sometimes with those, but. Sometimes they have a return window or a cancellation window where you're like, hey, we didn't realize this car had a bunch of problems, or we got stuck at a charger. I mean, you could even use that as an excuse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll have to look into that. But that's the one thing that I learned this week. So
there you go. Wow.
Yeah.
Fun.
See what happens. Yeah, fun.
On that note.
Let's talk about actual good charging experience.
Right. Yeah. So the bulk of the episode, where we've been hyping it up since our return, but Brandon and Tyler got back from their long distance. It was 10 days. Is that right? 14 days?
Yeah, I think it was 15 days. It was 15 or
days?
16.
Okay, so just over 2 weeks. Cross-country road trip, national parks, the whole nine. I think we're going to mainly focus on the charging part of it, but feel free to sprinkle in any other fun stories from national parks or whatever else on here.
Yeah. So I don't know where you want me to. Do you want me to just start from the beginning? Because I was thinking of how to structure this, and I think it would be good to talk about how we planned the trip.
Yes, that was going to be my suggestion for sure.
Okay. Yeah, we'll start with that. Tyler did it all. No, he did the bulk of the.
I want to go on a trip. Can you plan this, please?
That's essentially how it played out. He did everything, and I just went along with it. But so yeah, we planned this trip back in 2022. Actually, it popped in our heads. And, you know, we always wanted to do a long-distance electric road trip. It's actually been on my bucket list ever since I worked for Tesla, you know, almost 10 years ago, which is really hard to believe.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Well, I'm rounding up a few years. But, but you know, I've always dreamt of doing a long-distance road trip. And, you know, we've always wanted to go to the Badlands in South Dakota. We've always wanted to go out west to, like, Yellowstone and Utah and, you know, explore, like, the Southwest, like New Mexico. And, you know, we finally had the opportunity. We had the Model 3, and, so essentially the bulk of the planning, believe it or not, wasn't revolving around charging. It was mostly figuring out the bulk of our travel days, because we did, in summary, about 6,500 total miles within 15 to 16 days.
Wow.
Which
is
yeah,
what?
we visited.
That's probably like half of the driving that a normal person does in a year. Like average, I think, is around like 13,000. So that's like, imagine doing 6 months of driving in 15 days, basically.
Yes. Yeah. On average, we drove about 10 to 12 hours during our travel days. So that was probably, I'm trying to think of, I think that was probably averaging about 400 to 500 miles every single like travel day. A little bit more. I think one day we did 600 miles.
Jeez.
Which was nuts. You know, we would start at like 5 a.m. and drive until like 10 p.m.
Jeez.
Those were long days.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the bulk of the planning was actually revolved around, you know, the parks that we wanted to go to. We went to 8 national parks, and as we go through this, I'll kind of go in order of which ones we visited. But then finding charging stations in terms of like hotels and finding places we could charge it overnight. We knew the bulk of the traveling was going to be done through Tesla superchargers. So we kind of let our car figure that out as we did most of our travel days. But the rest of it was figuring out like, campsites that have charging stations or hotels that have charging stations. And of course, we used ChargeWay to do that. And we used our ChargeWay trip planner too to try to figure out how we were going to break up the days in terms of which superchargers we'd go to. So that was the bulk of the planning. And just trying to figure out what the infrastructures were like, especially in New Mexico. Parts of where we went didn't have any superchargers, so we had to rely on other network charging stations.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we ran into no issues.
Wow.
Charging wise, at least in New Mexico. I'll get to the other aspects later.
So you almost kind of started with the destinations, if you will, then work backwards instead of starting with, oh, there's a charger here, so it'd be good to stop around here. You kind of did the opposite in a lot of ways.
Correct. Yeah, and that, I mean, honestly, like, we've talked about it so many times on our podcast, like, that's the blessing of having a Tesla, is that you can kind of just get in and go. You don't really have to overly plan things like you might in, like, another electric vehicle.
Right.
But the one thing, there was a bug that just flew in front of my face.
I saw that.
Yeah, I was just like, what was that? But the one thing that we really had to figure out is, since we were traveling, we had a electric cooler with us that plugged into our 12-volt battery, or into like our cigarette lighter, our 12-volt outlet, and then we also had a Thole roof box that can impact your efficiency. And the thing that we got most on Twitter, and I'm sure people who are listening to this, is, why is your roof box on backwards?
Yeah.
So we mounted that due to science. We've done a lot of research on it, and if you actually flip your roof box in reverse to how you typically would think a roof box would go on, it actually creates more downforce on the vehicle that helps with aerodynamics versus if you have it the way that you typically see, like in images, or that the manufacturer even tells you to put it on. It can actually ruin your efficiency. So the entire trip, I believe we calculated, the roof box only impacted our efficiency by about 3 to 5%.
Wow,
which was
that's pretty good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so the first big leg is we went up through Illinois, up through Wisconsin, and into Minnesota, where we actually met up with Brian Ryby from YouTube. I want to give him a quick shout out. Definitely check out his YouTube. He's been on our podcast before. Got a chance to meet up with him at a Minnesotan supercharger, which is pretty cool.
There you go.
And then we ended up going to South Dakota from there. That was honestly the longest bulk of the trip. And I'm sorry I'm talking so much. If you have any questions...
Oh, go for it. Yeah, I'll cut you off.
Yeah. So South Dakota was probably one of the longest parts of our trip, only because South Dakota really only has red level 6 V2 superchargers across like the entire way that we went through. Like, so it's been a few weeks since I've driven through some of these cities, but I think it's Soy Falls. I think it's Soy Falls. Soy Falls.
I think it's just
Somebody
Sioux
listening
Falls.
will have to correct me. What is it?
Isn't it just Sioux Falls? That's
Sioux
what I
Falls.
thought. I don't think it's Suey,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
but I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody correct us.
Yes, someone correct us. We'll have to do that, name thing, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, and we hit a really strong headwind. I mean, like it was, I believe it was like 20 to 25 miles per hour hitting us while we had like a roof box.
Yeah.
And it just destroyed our efficiency. So we had to stop at literally every single supercharger from the border of Minnesota through to the Badlands. And it was
Oh my gosh.
4 charging stops.
So is that every hour? Is that every like 2 hours?
It was like
how often is that?
Yeah, it was like every hour and a half that we had to stop.
Okay.
So
not
at least
awful, but
no.
probably more than you wanted.
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely the longest part of like in terms of charging
Right.
for our trip. But our first stop was the Badlands National Park in South Dakota. Highly recommend if have you been there before?
I have not, no. I haven't been to a lot of national parks, so I'm very jealous of this whole trip.
You should have come along.
I know, yeah. We can take my car this time.
Yeah, all the free supercharger miles.
Right.
Yeah. But we stopped at the Badlands, and there really isn't a lot of infrastructure in terms of like level 2 charging. But the Badlands KOA actually has a NEMO 1450 that you can plug into that's dedicated for EV charging.
Okay.
Which was really nice. So we the KOAs are really starting to install those across the country. Certain national park KOAs have those at the moment, but the Badlands is one of those. And it was helpful because it was triple digits the entire time we were there.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was like 106 degrees the entire time.
Is the car just crazy loud when it's that hot? Like, trying to keep everything cool? That's what I've noticed in super hot temperatures is, like, EVs can get louder than gas cars just staying running because it's so hot. So, it's pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah, especially Teslas. I feel like for some reason, like, Teslas are so loud compared to other EVs.
Which I don't know if that's good because it's, like, running to keep the battery cold and, like, cabin cold and everything, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, there was one hike where we were out in the Badlands, and I was like, oh, it's hot. I'm going to start the car with the app. And as we were coming down the trail, you could hear the car from the parking lot.
Oh, my gosh.
So loud.
Just ramping up like a generator or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was ridiculous how loud it was. But yeah, from there we ended up going to Yellowstone. And what was well, actually, I'm kind of skipping a part. Let me take a step back. So from the Badlands, we ended up going to Mount Rushmore, and as we were going further west, there was actually some wildfires that were happening within Wyoming and Montana. That actually created smog literally for like 400 miles worth of driving.
Wow.
And it kind of like reinforced why we were doing this in an electric vehicle. It's like for one, reducing like air pollution, but like also it's clear that the impacts of climate change are happening all over the West.
Right.
And when we were at Mount Rushmore, the entire thing was just like hazy because of this like wildfire smoke. Which was like slightly disappointing, because it's like it's a national like monument, so like it was interesting to see, but yeah, the smoke definitely impacted.
Put a damper on it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there are actually plenty of level 2 charging stations at Mount Rushmore in the parking garage.
That's good.
Which was pretty cool. But we really didn't need it. The car was handling amazing after we got out of that headwind. Most of the trip up to Yellowstone was actually through a tailwind, which helped our efficiency immensely.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. Yellowstone has level 2 charging stations as well near Old Faithful. It's a little further off near some of the cabins. But you can easily charge your vehicle there. We didn't have to because they actually have a supercharger right outside the gates of Yellowstone.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, and this is actually where one of the coolest experiences of our trip happened. So the pedestrian alert when you put your car in reverse?
Yeah.
So the superchargers in Yellowstone are actually right in the parking lot of a bear and wolf, not like a reservation, but like a bear and wolf like rescue facility.
Okay.
And like an education facility. And when we were backing up after we spent the whole day, it was dusk, our backup sound actually triggered the wolves to start howling.
Whoa.
And it was so hauntingly cool. Like, we got out of the car and all you could hear is wolves calling for each other, then wolves in the distance start calling each other. Like,
oh my
I have a video of
gosh.
it. I'll send it to you.
Wow. Was this like at
so
dark
cool.
too? Or was it? Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. It was by far one of the coolest experiences of our trip.
Wow. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Was that your closest experience with wildlife, or did you did you have to drive around any wildlife or anything like that on your through Yellowstone?
Yeah, we did. So just to jump back to Badlands, there's prairie dogs and bison everywhere.
Right.
I think I mentioned when we were talking outside of recording, the prairie dogs are just they're
like squirrels, right? They're just everywhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, they tried to get in the car with us. Like, we went to this one campsite to, like, use the bathroom, and there was hundreds of them trying to get into the bathroom in your car, like on the picnic tables, like
That's so funny.
nuts.
They love EVs.
Oh yes, yeah, they must.
That's a bumper sticker right there. Is prairie dogs love EVs?
With their little arms, like
Yeah,
might have to make that.
it's new merch right there.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, no. In Yellowstone, we ran into so many different wildlife. It was actually the end of the bison rutting season, which was actually good because they tend to get a little crazy during that time. They'll actually like chase you down on paths and like actually like hit your car and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah.
If you get too close. But yeah, we ran into we were coming around one corner and there was a bison just standing there on the side of the road, like probably like
Just chilling.
this far away from my face in the passenger seat, like
Wow.
just chilling.
Wow.
We got to hike next to some of them, which was really cool. They were just chilling next to the path as we were walking through like the springs and the geysers and stuff like that. But the craziest experience in Yellowstone is we were wrapping up one of our day. And in Yellowstone, you can always tell when there's an animal around because there's always traffic. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, people just go crazy, which is, cool. But we were coming around the corner, and there was a river, and we saw all these cars, and we're like, there has to be something here. And there was 3 grizzly bears, a mom and her 2 cubs playing in the river.
Wow.
It was so cool. And then we got to see a moose in the river.
Nice.
And then, yeah, just one moose, a singular moose.
Just one.
Just one. And then elk as well, which were pretty cool. But as we were leaving Yellowstone, it's the elk's rutting season, so they people actually warned us. They're like, if you see an elk like driving, go the other way because they will actually puncture your tires.
Oh, wow.
And, like, hit your car with their antlers, and yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah. But we did get to spend the night, 3 nights under the stars at a cattle ranch in Idaho, right outside of Yellowstone. And
Nice.
they didn't have any charging options for us, so we had to rely a lot on that supercharger. But it was still really cool to take the Tesla back there, and I got a really cool shot of the stars with our tent with our Model 3.
I think I saw that one. Yeah, that was really
we'll
cool.
have to post some of those in the YouTube video. So
For sure.
yeah. But yeah, that was such a cool experience.
That's awesome.
I feel like I'm doing my like origin story again. I feel like I'm just rambling.
Was Yellowstone the because that's one of the bigger national parks in the U.S., right? Like just land wise.
I think it's 2 million acres, from my understanding.
Okay. Was that the
Yeah.
biggest one that you visited on the trip, or were there some others that were close?
That was the biggest one. I think we only saw like 10% of the park.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure you could
it's-
spend months there, like if you actually wanted to see all of it. So
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, like a lot of it, like, if you want to go see the geysers in the springs, you can do a lot of that within a day.
Yeah.
We walked 11 miles one day, which was
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. But you can definitely see like a lot of the springs and geysers in one day, but like all the lakes and the hiking trails and stuff, you could easily spend like weeks there.
nice. Was charging or anything like that limiting on what parts of the park you could get to? Because obviously 2 million acres is a lot of land area. Is there any parts that were like limited in a sense?
Not that we went to. Every time before we entered the park, we stopped at that supercharger just to top off, just in case.
Yeah.
And that was the best aspect of coming in from the west through like the west gates of Yellowstone.
Yeah.
But like if you're going further into the park, you'd probably have to start worrying about charging. But I do know that they have some level 2 chargers at like some of the cabins and like some of the employee campsites.
Gotcha. It's kind of scattered in there. Okay.
Yeah. But I think if you have like a lower range EV, it might be something to like be a little worried about. But it was funny.
Right.
We were coming into the park and we saw a Nero electric leaving.
Really?
Or a Nero EV, and I was like, how'd you
get here?
I was like, there's no CCS, like green infrastructure, like in
Anywhere
the vicinity
close?
of like, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So like even near Yellowstone, like I think there are some charging stations. I can't think of off the top of my head, but I'm like, good
Right.
for you.
Yeah.
You
Honestly.
adventure.
What kind of vehicles were most common out there? Is it a lot of trucks and SUVs like you see everywhere else, or are there people like in sedans and smaller cars?
You're gonna laugh at this. I want you to I want you to guess which one it is.
Are there just a ton of like Subaru Crosstreks or something?
Yeah, so many Outbacks. So
Or
many
Outbacks,
Subaru
yeah.
Outbacks. Yes, they are
That's funny,
everywhere.
actually. That's
Yeah.
really funny.
Yes.
That's so
yeah,
funny.
they are everywhere. But besides like Subarus, there were so many camper vans. Like it really so many camper vans.
Interesting.
Honestly, like our entire trip, that's mainly what we saw is like a lot of like the Mercedes camper vans.
Yeah,
a lot
the
of
big Sprinter
Ford
vans.
Transit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like we saw one that I think Tyler said it was like $300,000. Like it was like one of the
Wow.
luxury camper vans.
Dang.
Yeah, yeah, but it was kind of like a mix. You know, like you saw like some sedans, you saw some like Jeeps and trucks and things like
Yeah.
that. But it was by far Subarus.
That's
our entire
hilarious.
trip.
That's really funny. A lot of outdoorsy people in their Subarus, I guess.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Are there any
But,
like Sprinter vans out there that are electric? I guess you could get like a Ford E-Transit and maybe like retrofit it to be like a camper van, but that's maybe the
Yeah.
only one I can think of.
I know that there's another company. I just saw Electrek post about it. I think it was last week. There's a camper that can do about 200 plus miles. I think it's like 240 miles on a full charge.
Oh wow.
And I think it's Winnebago. They're working on an electric one as well.
Really? Nice.
I believe
Okay.
so. Yeah, that whole world. I was really involved with it when we were actually like traveling, and then
I'm sure,
it kind of
yeah.
fell off my plate for a little bit. But, yeah,
That's funny.
but yeah, no, that we saw a lot of Teslas too. Like there was
That's good.
a lot of Teslas in Yellowstone, Badlands, lots of Teslas. Yeah, there are a lot of Teslas on this trip.
That's good that it's not like people aren't limiting themselves, I guess. And I'm sure that supercharger helps. Like if people say, "Oh, there's a fast charger," like as long as if I'm within 100 miles of this, like I'll be okay, like to get back to this at least. So, are there others around other superchargers around Yellowstone, like at other entrances or anything like that, or just that west entrance?
I believe there's one in the north, like in Montana, but I'm not exactly like off the top of my head, like if there's like a northern gate to Yellowstone. I think there's like an east, a west, and
Yeah.
a south, but I'm not sure if there's a north. But the
Gotcha.
most convenient one
Okay.
is obviously going down through like Idaho and then kind of like northwest or northeast into the western side.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a lot of times with like the national park, it's one element of infrastructure, but also two being respectful of like the nature itself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But
So you're in
yeah.
Yellowstone. You wrapped up Yellowstone with the cattle ranch camping, is that right? And then you moved on from there. Was that your last nights there?
Yeah, we spent a few nights there. It was freezing. It was like 30 degrees at night, and they didn't have hot water because it was it was let's just be honest, it was kind of the glamping experience. Like we had a really nice like yurt, but there was no hot water at all. So like showering and like like getting ready at like 30-degree weather, it was
You're just trying
it was
to
a
stay
wake
warm.
up.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was fun, and obviously we had to be mindful of our charge, so like we couldn't just sleep in the car, like if
Right.
it got, like we could if it got too cold, but we
Yeah.
were prepared. But from there we actually went to one of my favorite parks on the trip, Grand Teton, down near Jackson, Wyoming.
Nice.
It's about like an hour and a half, 2 hours south of Yellowstone, so it's fairly close to Yellowstone, and we were able to make it there on a charge. And there's actually a supercharger in Jackson, Wyoming, because it's more of like a ski town resort.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Resort town, lots of money. I mean, the houses are like, I think I sent you one of the examples.
Just
It's like
insane.
$40 million.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
insane.
But plenty of charging in Jackson. I do believe. See, this is where like it's been long enough to where I'm forgetting parts of the trip, but I believe that the only fast charger in Jackson is a supercharger. But I'll have to go back and refresh. refresh my mind. But Grand Teton is honestly one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Like in my opinion, at least in the United States, like the mountain range, the glaciers, and just like the crystal clear glacier lakes that we got to experience. It was a beautiful experience. And what was cool is that in Grand Teton, whereas Yellowstone is so popular with tourism, when you go to Grand Teton, it's like you still get that experience without the people. So I highly recommend, if Yellowstone is too much for you, go to Grand Teton.
Yeah, that's good to know.
You don't get Old Faithful, but
right. I feel like there's a lot of national parks like that kind of fly under the radar that people don't talk about a lot, but give you just everything that you'll see at some of these other well-known national parks. So that's good to know that that's available there. So from so Yellowstone to Grand Teton, and then where from there?
So we ended up going south from there. So we went to Utah from there. And honestly, like, charging was like an issue. There was plenty of superchargers, level 2s, you know, if we need to stop while we had like lunch or something. But we ended up going down to Moab, to Arches National Park, as well as Canyonlands. Yeah. Because they're literally across the highway from each other. Like, it's you can kill two birds with one stone when you go to Moab.
That's funny.
Yeah. But it was Moab. Right now, they only have fast chargers that work with Tesla, so they only have superchargers there. Tesla just opened up a Magic Dock location literally a week after we left Moab.
Really?
So you can now take your non-Tesla vehicles there, but the only fast charging option is superchargers at the moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But Arches was really a really cool national park. Just getting around like all the sandstone and seeing all like the natural formed arches and getting a chance to hike up those and do some rock climbing. That was really cool.
Yeah. Was there any point, because you mentioned there was lots of opportunities to stop, were there any where you had to, like there was only one supercharger stop, like along your route, if you will?
Yeah. So going from Yellowstone down to Utah, we had to stop at a location in Idaho.
Okay.
I can't remember off the top of my head like which city it was, but it was in the way back of a shopping center that didn't open until 10 a.m. on a Saturday. And we got there at 7:30.
Oh, no.
When you need to use the bathroom and there's no places around you, that was...
It helps
that
when
was
you're a male, I guess, but...
Yeah. That was one of the rougher supercharger experiences. I'm trying to think if there was one that was like really the only option. There was a few later on, like when we get into
like you
like,
need
New
to stop here, you can't stretch it and go to the next one or something like that.
Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Utah was kind of like that, or sorry, not Utah. South Dakota was kind of like that, just because of that headwind
you just had to stop every single one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I know that's at least what I've noticed in my very limited travels compared to this trip recently, is there's now multiple options to stop. Like Tesla will plan out your route, but if you want to push it and go to like the next one or stop earlier, like there's way more options to charge than there were even a few years ago. So I'm sure they'll continue to fill those out as as time goes on.
For sure. Yeah, and that's actually one thing I want to touch on before I get into the rest of my story. The navigation aspect and like the range estimates that the navigation was providing us were like spot on.
That's crazy.
There was many times where we actually went about 3 hours worth of driving before we even had to stop and charge.
Dang.
And that was probably like about 150 to like 180 miles.
Yeah.
We calculated, just to summarize it really fast, we stopped about 47 times on our trip to charge. And, divide that by 6,500 miles. I believe that's about like 135 to 140 miles on average that we had to stop and charge. But most of the time we went like three and a half hours without having to stop and charge.
Wow, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Which, especially with like a roof box and having all the gear that we had in our vehicle.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't want to skip to the end or what with because I have some final like summarizing questions at the end there. But so
Yeah.
what are the last few stops there before you went home,
Oh, yeah.
or was that one of the last ones?
Yeah, I want to highlight the challenging part of our drive, which was New Mexico, which was more southern New Mexico than it is near like Albuquerque and Santa Fe. But we ended up driving to Alamogordo, where the White Sands National Park is, and there's no supercharger infrastructure there. There's Francis Energy charging stations at some of the gas stations there. And some of them they're still working on to go live. So we had to rely on a 60 kilowatt level 5 charging station in a very, very small remote town that we have been told that you don't go to at night. And of course we went to at night, but we had to charge. You know, we hit a terrible thunderstorm that just destroyed our range traveling across the White Sands. From Socorro to Corzozo, New Mexico. And I do want to just say that, like, when it comes to, like, those warnings from, like, locals, you know, like, I definitely take those with a grain of salt, only because, like, a lot of these cities are so forgotten with you know, their history, especially, you know, I know our podcast isn't political, but I do want to just say it's sad that with the whole Trinity site atomic bomb testing, like, you know, like, these cities are really forgotten, and it's very obvious when you're traveling through those areas that it is like that. So you know, we stopped to charge there, and then we ended up relying on a non-network station at a Chevy dealership in Alamogordo because we were going to Roswell, which was so fortunate because ChargePoint just went live with 4 fast chargers, like literally 2 days before we were going to Roswell. And it's literally on the outskirts of Roswell.
Dang.
But this is one of the worst charging experiences on this entire trip, because kudos to the New Mexican, like, you know, like travel, department for installing these charging stations. But that charging station is on the side of a highway next to gates that are locked with barbed wire. And there's no bathroom except literally a half-mile walk down the highway to a power sports built like company. And they like, I just want to give that company a shout out because they were so welcoming to us. We literally had to walk on the highway in the rain.
No sidewalk, like
nope.
Oh my gosh.
I had no idea why they thought that was the best location for those charging stations.
Jeez. Yeah. Especially fast charging. Like, if that's one thing we could highlight right here, like, especially fast charging, it's a project. It's not just something you drop in and, like, start making money from. Like, you've gotta have the infrastructure around it. You've gotta have bathrooms. Like, this needs to be a comfortable stop for people. Like, we've gotten to the point that people are at least expecting a gas station type experience where something's open 24 hours, there's lights, they have a bathroom. Like, it doesn't need to be crazy, but like, people need to use the restroom, they might need a snack, like all of this stuff. It's more than just dropping a charger in. So that's frustrating.
That was, and it was dangerous, to be honest,
right?
Like, walking on
it's
that
a safety
highway.
issue.
Fortunately, you know, I was monitoring New Mexico like for months, trying to figure out like which stations were going to go live. And there's a Francis Energy station that's being commissioned that I think it actually just went live recently near Roswell. And Electrify America is putting one in. And I know Tesla is doing voting for one outside of Roswell. So hopefully next time, if we ever make it down to New Mexico, we'll have plenty of options.
Right.
But once we got back up to near like Santa Fe, it was just superchargers the rest of the way.
That's good.
Yeah. But I do want to just say really fast that the coolest supercharger, and I don't know if this was one of your questions. Was that one of your questions?
I don't think
so. Coolest locations?
Go for it.
Okay. I just want to say the one thing that I love about Tesla and like how they navigate you to certain places is that like you almost never really know exactly where you're going. Like, you know, like you do and you don't. Like, you don't know exactly which building you're going to end up at. And that was
fair.
That was one thing that shocked us as we were traveling through northern Texas, is our car told us to get off the highway, and it was like 4 miles to the supercharger, and like, you know, the sun's setting, we're like, this is weird, like I don't know where we're going. And we got on Route 66, and all of a sudden we saw this old gas station with like green neon lights. And as we started realizing it was actually the gas station that inspired the movie Cars, with the gas station in that movie. And they have Tesla superchargers in the back parking lot. So
that's super
got
cool.
a chance. I think it's an old Kanoko station, if I remember. I'll have to double check. I think that's what it was. But we got a chance to take some photos with the Tesla next to the old gas pumps underneath the green neon lights. And yeah, that was a really cool charging stop.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then on the way back, you kind of took a different route, didn't you? Didn't you go kind of more south, or kind of like you traveled more like northeast instead of coming from the west, if you will?
Yeah. We kind of did like a big circle. The last national park that we stopped at was the St. Louis Arch. So we ended up from Santa Fe. We went through the northern part of Texas, through Oklahoma, and then up through Missouri, through St. Louis, through Indiana, and then over to Columbus.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But I do want to just touch on one wild fact about wildlife really fast.
Yeah.
So we saw tarantulas in New Mexico, which was really cool, like in their wild, natural environment. But the one thing we didn't expect is Oklahoma to have tarantulas. We literally saw them crossing the highway because I guess like we came in during their mating season, and that's the only time they leave their webs, and
they're just
their
all over the place.
They're literally huge, and just see them running across the highway and stuff.
Yeah,
we're in Oklahoma.
Right. That's funny.
So fun fact.
There you
go.
Yeah. So overall, were there any points where you had like just general range anxiety, or were you like pretty confident you were going to get to a charger, it was going to be cutting it close, but you weren't like freaked out about it, if you will?
Yeah. I don't really think there was any point where we were like cutting it close, just because of how amazingly efficient the Model 3 is.
Right.
Even with a roof box and like a ton of camping and hiking gear, the car was extremely efficient.
That's good.
So I know the lowest we ever got was probably about like 8 or 10% state of charge.
Okay.
But that was like right as we got to a supercharger.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only part that really freaked me out slightly was southern New Mexico. Just like trying to figure out that.
And trying to figure all that out.
Yeah. Not to mention the spooky vibes that parts of New Mexico gives off, but yeah.
Do you remember your average efficiency for the whole trip, like miles per kilowatt hour or anything like that? I don't know if you have data on that. I'm just curious.
I know Tyler posted, so let me pull up his tweet. This is how unprepared I am.
It's all good.
So if I'm just going to say this to any listener that wants to kind of get a summary from like a visual and data breakdown, go to Tyler's Twitter page, because he actually has an entire thread and he broke down every single charging stop that we did.
Right.
Which
we'll link that in the show notes too.
Yes. Yep. His, we can definitely add his Twitter there. What was your question again?
Average efficiency for the whole trip. Do you have any data on that by chance?
I'm gonna have to look at Tyler's tweet, Twitter, but I'm pretty sure we were averaging about 3.3 to 3.5 miles to the kilowatt hour.
Okay, so pretty good.
Which was, especially with the roof box, it actually was pretty impressive.
Right. Yeah. Were there? With everything like you're hauling and stuff like that too, was there anything you think you could have done differently to make it more efficient? Like, were there times where you maybe were driving too fast or thought you had too much stuff? Like, was there anything like that you maybe would have done differently?
I think probably a lighter load in the vehicle would have been a good thing. The roof box is, we were forced to drive under the speed limit because the roof box is rated at a max of 75 miles per hour.
Really?
And
interesting.
When you're going through South Dakota, they have 80 mile per hour speed limits.
It's crazy fast there.
Yeah. So we went about 72 like the entire way, which I think actually really helped our efficiency.
Right.
But I think just having a lighter load and just being a little bit more mindful of the stuff we actually needed, because overpacked a lot.
Yeah, which is probably easy to do if this is your first time on a like nationwide road trip of this magnitude, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody would do that. So
Definitely. Yeah.
Trying to think of what else, because that was a really good like in-depth summary. We'll definitely link Tyler's thread. That's like if you really want to dig into the details and see every charging stop and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think definitely highly recommend looking at Tyler's Twitter, because I feel like this conversation was more talking about like the national parks and our experiences versus the actual like charging like experience. Yeah. One thing I do want to wrap up with is because we did the cost comparison to what it would be like in a comparable like vehicle. So we compared the Model 3 to, say, like a BMW 3 Series E, their plug-in hybrid. And for our Model 3 with 47 charging stops, I know that's a lot of stops. It was about $647 to go 6,500 miles, which is very cost-effective because when we compared it to the plug-in hybrid, it was about $1,200. So it was literally almost 50% cheaper to take our Tesla.
Wow.
Stop just a few more times and save, hundreds of dollars.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we covered most of it. So I know we're coming up on an hour here recording. So.
Oh, geez.
Well, yeah. Anything else you want to wrap up with before we?
Yeah, I do want to just
here?
say if you want an itinerary for like our trip, let us know. We still have spreadsheets that Tyler put together. And I say get out there. Take your EV in places that you normally wouldn't think it would go, and just
Definitely.
experience it. See where it takes you. But plan ahead. We're getting there with the infrastructure, but right now just plan ahead. Just make sure things are working.
Right.
So
especially if we got to leave, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry to end on that note, but
yeah, no. Listening to this podcast, you won't see my eye roll.
All right. I think that's all we got. So we'll catch you in the next episode.